Welcome to a slightly technical video on a slightly technical channel in which we are going to talk about some slightly technical things. This time something actually really interesting. I am absolutely ready to tackle this topic because today I want to talk about a very special type of pedal that has been mentioned in our world so many times, but somehow I always fail to see in pretty much other YouTube videos some things discussed about these pedals, which are extremely important to understand so you know how to use them, whether you should use them, whether you need them, should you buy them, and that kind of stuff. Today, I want to talk about amp-in-a-box pedals, because why not? Because why shouldn't you have an amplifier in a box? It's small, it's practical, it's nice, a lot of them look really cool, but there are a lot of problems. So basically, what I want to talk about today, obviously, what is an amp in a box? What's the difference between an amp in a box and a preamp? What are the problems with amp in a box pedals? Because I am absolutely sure that a lot of people had some of the problems. And what are the solutions to these problems? So we're gonna dive in, all the graphic-y stuff that I do, some playthroughs, all the good stuff. I am absolutely prepared. Obviously, Shroom Cup is here. I do also have some squeezed lemon to sort of counter the whole shit ton of coffee that I had today, and I suggest you do the same. So I hope you're ready, and let's proceed. So what is an amp-in-a-box pedal? Well, amp-in-a-box pedals are basically just pedals. Most of them run on 9 volts. Now I'm talking about amp-in-a-box pedals that are talked about in general, all right, what people refer to as amp in a box. Obviously, there are a lot of different products, but in general, these are just pedals. They're exactly the same like other pedals. They would run on 9 volts, they're small, but they are just represented that they do a certain amplifier sound. But what does that actually mean? Now, I will show you now something that is, in my opinion, the crucial factor that makes the difference between an amp in a box pedal and a pedal. So what makes an amp-in-a-box pedal different from other pedals is actually the EQ curve employed in this amp-in-a-box. Now this is not exclusive, but I'm talking in general. Obviously you would have different EQ curves in different pedals, but I would say that all amp-in-a-box pedals, because they say they emulate a certain type of amplifier, they would have the same EQ curve as this amplifier. Now a lot of you know that I absolutely love Duncan's Stone Stack calculator, which shows us graphically what this EQ curve looks like. So if we take a look here, we obviously have the Marshall EQ curve, then you'd have the Fender EQ curve, you'd have the Vox EQ curve, all right? You have other obviously amplifiers and EQ curves, but most amplifiers, not all of them, but most amplifiers have an EQ curve like this. And what do they all have in common? So amp-in-a-box pedals basically have an EQ curve that has a dip in the mids. Now, how does that affect our life? Now here comes the problem. If you use an amplifier that has a dip in the mids, and then you plug in a pedal that also has a dip in the mids, these two EQ curves will, in a way, they will interact, all right? And the resulting sound will be quite different compared to like any other pedal, like overdrive pedal, that doesn't have this dip in the mids. Because most pedals, actually what they do, they're kind of mid-range. Some of them brighter, some of them not as bright. Some of them have more bass and some of them have less bass. But when you plug a pedal which has like a dip in the mids, right? A dip in the mids, dip in the mids, dip in the mids. When you plug a pedal which doesn't have this mid-range into an amplifier which also has this lack of mid-range, what happens is that you get quite a scooped sound, which then pronounces some treble frequencies, and as a result, a lot of times you get a very unpleasant sound with which you don't really know what to do. It's very important to note that even when you have this EQ curve and you have all the controls, even when you turn the mids all the way up, you will still have this sort of scoop thing happening. We can make a test. Let's go. Let's, for example, see Fender EQ curve. Let's turn the mids all the way up. You see, it's still scooped basically. So basically what I'm saying is that when you combine these pedals with certain amplifiers, you will get a quite a scooped sound, and sometimes it's really hard, near to impossible, to dial it out. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad sound. Some amp-in-a-box pedals work great with some amplifiers, and you can get great sounds. I'm just saying that a lot of people don't know what they're getting, and then they have a problem. There is one thing that I want to mention. When pedal designers design amp-in-a-box pedals, we could take Bread for an example, because I think he made these great designs that were like amp-in-a-box things, especially with like FETs and MOSFETs and stuff like that, which was really interesting. He would design his pedals for a Fender amplifier, specifically a blackface. I don't remember, was it a deluxe or something like that, but basically these pedals are designed to sound great with that particular pedal, because he would adjust the presence and the voicing of the pedal for that particular amplifier. The big problem is when you take a pedal like that, and these pedals are great, don't get me wrong, but if you take a pedal like that and you go to a gig and you rent out some equipment, you don't know what you're getting. You get a, let's say, a Marshall amplifier or something, there is a high chance that this pedal will not work as good on that amplifier, and that you will have huge problems dialing out some frequencies that basically you don't like. Now, before we get into the testing and demonstration that I'm going to do, I want to talk about one more thing, because there was a question asked to me once before. What is the difference between amp-in-a-box pedals and a preamplifier? Well, in general, all like distortion pedals and that kind of stuff, you can call them preamplifiers. They are essentially, like, in a way, they are a preamplifier. But I would say that the biggest difference between amp-in-a-box and a preamplifier is the fact that preamplifiers are usually designed to have a different output. Let's say they would have more sauce, more output, so they can drive power amps better. That's why if you take a pedal and plug it into a power amp, in some cases it will work, because there are different designs of amplifiers, obviously, but in some cases it won't have enough volume to drive the power amp, and I would say that that would be the main difference between a preamplifier and an amp-in-a-box. Otherwise, they would be like pretty similar devices, obviously with all the differences that can be included, but they would have like an EQ curve. They will try to emulate some gain staging from an amplifier, and obviously like that kind of stuff. And by the way, if you like the information that I'm giving you in this videos, please support me by joining the Slightly Technical Academy, because over there registration is for free, and I have some super cool free Tonex packs and obviously some other full packs which I'm actually currently working on, and they sound great. The Angle is coming out, and my Sound City is something that I've been working on, and we're gonna hear the Sound City in this video. So like really cool stuff on the Slightly Technical Academy. Check it out, and I thank you for it. And please, it's free. You can just subscribe to the channel and like the video if you like it. Thank you. Everybody knows that I love to do these noise, like white noise testing, because you can graphically see what's happening and understand actually what's happening without the usage of any, you know, like guitar player words to describe the sound and noodling, my favorite thing on the internet. Noodling. So basically what we're gonna do, we're gonna run a white noise signal through my Tonex, because it's convenient, it's easy, because I have created some tone models that can represent this greatly. So basically, if we run the white noise, we're gonna get a flat line. And now I'm going to engage the tone model of my Sound City, which has a lot of mods and has a lot of gain, but basically it is the distortion from the amplifier, all right? And let's see what it looks like. All right, so that's obviously without the impulse response or anything like that. Now what I want to do, I want to show you what it looks like when I run the Sound City clean, but I use my pedal. The pedal that I was using is this emulator. It's my design, but basically it's not trying to emulate any kind of amplifier, but it has this typical passive EQ that you would find on amplifiers. Even though I do like this pedal, it's sometimes tricky to dial it in on certain amplifiers. But I want to show you how it works basically with the Sound City, which is completely modded to a high watt DR103. So it's basically the best possible pedal platform that you could possibly have. All right, so what we have seen now is that basically the high watt with the emulator is like, it has a higher scoop in the mids, like less mids obviously than the other like classic way that you would distort an amplifier. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that the sound was bad. We're gonna hear it in just a second. I'm just saying that that's what happens when you use an amp-in-a-box pedal with another amplifier that also has, like, you know, that. All right, so let me go get my guitar and let's just hear how these two combinations actually sound. All right, so now we had the opportunity to actually hear what the differences are, and I would say the emulator thing, definitely you can hear the scoop, but it's not necessarily bad. But obviously what I'm trying to illustrate in this goddamn video is that you can have a problem, all right? You have to pay attention to these things, and now we're coming to the solution to the problem. So, I would say a very simple solution. So solution number one would be use an EQ pedal after this type of overdrive. So you can sort of adapt it, maybe push a little bit of the mids and kind of adapt it to the amplifier to compensate for a certain frequency loss in a certain frequency range, obviously. So EQ pedals always fix things. Another thing which is really worth trying is using your amp-in-a-box pedal directly into the power amp of the amplifier, which a lot of the times works actually really cool. Really depends on the amplifier, really depends on if the amplifier has a power amp in or an effects loop in, if it has like a driver stage over there, that kind of stuff. But you should try that kind of thing, because a lot of the times I would use the emulator, for example, directly into my power station, use it as a power amp, and it actually sounds really good. So that is also a trick worth trying. The last thing that I want to mention is know your gear, because there are certain pedals like this one that would have like bass, middle and treble, but they don't have a passive EQ. They don't have this kind of curve. They're not amp-in-a-box pedals. They would have an active equalizer. What is good about the active equalizer is the fact that when it's flat, usually they design it to be completely flat, which means that you can amplify, you can attenuate a certain range of frequencies, you would have higher power into like dialing in sounds. Now, obviously that kind of pedal would be very different from this amp-in-a-box, because this mid scoop actually gives a lot of character and is honestly really responsible for a lot of the character in the amplifiers that we play, like where the scoop is placed and that kind of thing. But when using pedals, I honestly would suggest, especially if you're a live gigging musician and you are changing the platforms that you play on, don't bother with these pedals. Just get a pedal that has an active equalizer. Know if the pedal has an active or passive equalizer like this one, because basically with the active equalizer, you are just gonna not have these problems and you will be able to dial in your sound pretty much in any situation. So I hope you like the information that I gave you in this video. Like, share, subscribe, that kind of stuff. I'll be seeing you in the next video extremely soon. Bye.